It's 1513. Niccolo Machiavelli sits in exile, writing what will become the most controversial political treatise in history. But buried within The Prince lies a truth so devastating about human nature that it applies not just to kingdoms, but to every relationship between man and woman. Here's what Machiavelli understood that modern men have forgotten. The moment you place someone on a pedestal, you give them the power to look down on you. And when you worship a woman, you don't become her king, you become her subject. And subjects, my friend, are never desired. They're tolerated. This isn't about disrespecting women. This is about understanding a fundamental law of human psychology that governs attraction, respect, and desire. A law that Machiavelli identified centuries ago, watching princes lose their kingdoms by being too generous, too accommodating, too worshipful. Right now, millions of men are unknowingly destroying their relationships by doing exactly what they think will make them more attractive. They're killing desire with kindness. They're suffocating passion with pedestals. If you ever wonder why the nice guy finishes last, why being overly romantic backfires, or why the more you chase, the faster she runs, Machiavelli had the answer 500 years ago. Let's set the scene. Renaissance Italy, early 1500s. City-states rise and fall based on the whims of princes who either command respect or become doormats for more powerful neighbors. Machiavelli isn't just observing politics. He's watching human nature in its rawest form. Let's set the scene. Renaissance Italy, early 1500s. City-states rise and fall based on the whims of princes who either command respect or become doormats for more powerful neighbors. Machiavelli isn't just observing politics. He's watching human nature in its rawest form. And what he sees changes everything we think we know about power, respect, and yes, attraction. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This isn't just political advice. This is relationship psychology, centuries before psychology existed as a field. Think about it. When you worship a woman, when you're constantly available, always agreeing, perpetually accommodating, what are you appearing to be? You're appearing to be someone with no options, no standards, no life outside of her approval. Machiavelli understood that humans, all humans, are hardwired to value what's scarce and devalue what's abundant. A prince who gives away his treasure freely soon finds his treasury empty and his respect gone. A man who gives away his attention, time, and validation freely soon finds himself friend-zoned. But here's where it gets interesting. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty or manipulation. He was advocating for strategic thinking, for understanding human nature instead of fighting it. Let's break down what happens psychologically when a man worships a woman. First, worship creates an immediate power imbalance. When you put someone on a pedestal, you're literally positioning yourself below them. You're communicating without words that you believe they're inherently more valuable than you are. Machiavelli observed that princes who acted as if their subjects were superior to them quickly lost their authority. The same principle applies in romantic relationships. When you act as if she's out of your league, she starts to believe it too. Second, worship eliminates mystery and challenge. Machiavelli noted that humans are motivated by two primary forces, love and fear. Not fear of harm, but fear of loss. When you're always there, always available, always saying yes, there's nothing to lose, no mystery to unravel, no challenge to overcome. Think about the last time you wanted something badly. Chances are it was something slightly out of reach, something you had to work for. Easy wins don't feel like victories. They feel like participation trophies. Third, worship communicates desperation, not devotion. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of appearing confident and capable. A prince who appears desperate for alliance is exactly the prince other rulers avoid. A man who appears desperate for a woman's attention is exactly the man she'll lose interest in. Here's the brutal truth. Desperation has a scent. Women can smell it from miles away, and it's the opposite of attractive. But here's what's fascinating, and this is where Machiavelli's genius shines. He understood that the problem isn't caring about someone. The problem is caring so much that you lose yourself in the process. Machiavelli had front row seats to some spectacular failures of leadership. Let me tell you about a few princes who lost everything by being too accommodating, too generous, too worshipful of their subjects' approval. Take Piero Soderini, Florence's leader during Machiavelli's time. Soderini was beloved for his kindness, his patience, his willingness to always seek consensus. He never wanted to offend anyone. He bent over backward to make everyone happy. Result? He was overthrown without a fight. The very people he tried so hard to please abandoned him the moment a stronger leader appeared. Or consider Louis XII of France, who Machiavelli wrote about extensively. Louis was generous to a fault with his Italian allies. He gave them money, troops, support, whatever they asked for. He thought this generosity would secure their loyalty. Instead, it made them see him as weak. They took his resources and then allied with his enemies the moment it became convenient. Machiavelli's analysis was cold but accurate. Liberality exercised in a way that does not bring you the reputation for it injures you. For if one exercises it honestly and as it should be exercised, it may not become known, and you will not avoid the reproach of its opposite. Translation: if you're generous to get approval, you'll get neither respect nor genuine appreciation. Now, let's translate this to modern relationships. How many men do you know who shower women with gifts, compliments, and constant attention, thinking this will make them irresistible? And how often does this strategy work? The pattern is identical. The generous prince becomes the overthrown prince. The worshipful man becomes a forgotten man. Fast forward 500 years, and we're living through what can only be described as an epidemic of men who've forgotten Machiavelli's warnings. Social media has created a generation of digital peasants, liking every photo, commenting on every post, sliding into DMs with paragraphs of worship. They think they're being romantic. They're actually being repulsive. Here's what modern nice guys don't understand. Being nice isn't the problem. Being nice without boundaries, standards, or self-respect is the problem. Machiavelli distinguished between two types of generosity: strategic generosity that builds respect and desperate generosity that destroys it. The difference? The first comes from a position of strength, the second from a position of weakness. When you text her good morning every day without her reciprocating interest, that's desperate generosity. When you cancel plans with friends because she might be available, that's desperate generosity. When you agree with everything she says, even when you disagree, that's desperate generosity. And here's the kicker. Women can sense the desperation behind these actions. They can feel that you're not being generous because you want to be, but because you're afraid of losing them. Machiavelli wrote, "Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved." He wasn't talking about intimidation or abuse. He was talking about respect. A woman who respects you might fall in love with you. A woman who pities you never will. Think about the men women actually choose. Are they the ones who worship and pedestalize? Or are they the ones who have their own lives, their own goals, their own standards? The answer reveals an uncomfortable truth that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Humans don't desire what they can easily control. Let's dive deeper into the psychology of why worship kills desire. This is an opinion. This is documented human behavior that Machiavelli observed and modern psychology has confirmed. First, there's what psychologists call psychological reactance. When someone feels their freedom is threatened, even by too much attention and affection, they instinctively pull away. Machiavelli noticed this in politics. Subjects who felt controlled would rebel, even against benevolent rulers. In relationships, constant availability and agreement feels controlling, even when it's meant to be caring. It signals that you have no life, no opinions, no boundaries. That's not attractive, it's suffocating. Second, there's the scarcity principle. Machiavelli understood that what's rare is valued, what's common is taken for granted. A prince who granted audience to anyone at any time soon found his court empty when he actually needed support. Your attention, your time, your emotional investment. These should be valuable because they're not given freely to everyone. When you make yourself completely available to one person, you're communicating that your time has no value. Third, There's intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful psychological mechanism for creating addiction. Machiavelli saw this in how the most effective rulers combine reward and withdrawal, presence and absence. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time. That would be boring. It pays out unpredictably, creating obsession. The most magnetic people aren't consistently available. They're intermittently present. But here's where most men get it wrong. They think this means playing games or being cruel. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty. He was advocating for having a life worth living independent of any one person's approval. When you have genuine interests, goals, and relationships outside of her, your unavailability isn't a game, it's reality. And reality is always more attractive than performance. Here's where we need to make a crucial distinction that Machiavelli understood, but modern men often miss. There's a massive difference between respecting someone and worshiping them. Respect acknowledges someone's value while maintaining your own dignity. Worship acknowledges someone's value while surrendering your own. Machiavelli wrote about princes who could honor their allies without becoming subservient to them. They understood that respect is mutual. It flows both ways. Worship is unidirectional. It flows only upward. When you respect a woman, you appreciate her qualities without losing sight of your own worth. Value her opinions while maintaining your own perspectives. Care about her feelings without sacrificing your own needs. Support her goals while pursuing your own dreams. When you worship a woman, you elevate her qualities while diminishing your own worth. Adopt her opinions while abandoning your own perspectives. Prioritize her feelings while ignoring your own needs. Support her goals while abandoning your own dreams. The difference is self-respect. Machiavelli observed that princes who maintained their dignity while honoring others commanded the most respect in return. Those who debased themselves, even for noble reasons, were ultimately despised. Think about the most attractive couples you know. Is the dynamic one person worshiping the other? Or is it two people who clearly respect themselves and each other? Here's what's interesting. Women often complain about men who are too nice, but what they're really identifying is men who have no self-respect. Niceness with self-respect is attractive. Niceness without self-respect is pitiful. Machiavelli understood that strength attracts strength. When you maintain your own worth while appreciating hers, you create the kind of mutual respect that forms a foundation of genuine attraction. So, how do you apply Machiavellian principles to modern relationships without becoming manipulative or cruel? The key is understanding that Machiavelli's core insight was about strategic thinking, not strategic manipulation. First, maintain your kingdom just as a prince needs his own kingdom to rule from. You need your own life to live from. Your interests, your goals, your friendships, your passions. These aren't obstacles to love. They're prerequisites for respect. When she knows you have a full life that she enhances rather than defines, your attention becomes valuable because it's chosen, not desperate. Second, strategic generosity. Machiavelli advocated for calculated generosity, giving when it builds respect, not when it stems from fear. Be generous with your time and attention, but be strategic about it. Don't text constantly, text meaningfully. Don't be available always. Be present when you're together. Don't agree with everything. Engage with her ideas thoughtfully. Third, comfortable with conflict. Machiavelli noted that effective princes weren't afraid of disagreement. They were afraid of being walked over. In relationships, this means being comfortable with having different opinions, setting boundaries, and occasionally saying no. A man who never disagrees with a woman is a man who has no thoughts of his own, and a man with no thoughts of his own is not a man she can respect. Fourth, the art of absence. Machiavelli understood that presence gains power through strategic absence. In relationships, this doesn't mean disappearing or playing games. It means having a life full enough that you're naturally not always available. When your absence has weight because your presence has value, you've mastered one of Machiavelli's core principles. Fifth, outcome independence. The most powerful princes were those who could walk away from bad deals. In relationships, this means being willing to lose someone rather than lose yourself. Paradoxically, the willingness to walk away often makes walking away unnecessary. Now, here's where many men go wrong when they discover these principles. They swing from one extreme to the other, from worship to cruelty, from doormat to dominator. That's not what Machiavelli taught. He distinguished between being feared and being hated. An effective prince was respected, not resented. The modern pickup artist movement took some of Machiavelli's insights and corrupted them into manipulation tactics. They understood that worship doesn't work, but their solution was to become fake, game-playing versions of attractive men, rather than actually becoming attractive men. Machiavelli's approach was about genuine strength, not performed strength, about real confidence, not manufactured confidence, about authentic independence, not strategic unavailability. The difference is motive. Are you maintaining your standards because you respect yourself, or because you're trying to manipulate her emotions? Are you pursuing your goals because they matter to you, or because you're trying to appear mysterious? Women can sense the difference. Authentic self-respect is magnetic. Performed self-respect is transparent and unattractive. Here's the test. Would you maintain these standards and behaviors even if no woman ever noticed or cared? If the answer is yes, you're on the right track. If the answer is no, you're still playing games, just different games. Machiavelli's principles work because they're based on genuine human psychology, not manipulation tactics. When you truly respect yourself, others respect you too. When you have a life worth living, others want to be part of it. Here's what's fascinating about Machiavelli's insights. They apply far beyond romantic relationships. The man who worships women often worships other people's approval in every area of his life. He's the employee who can't say no to extra work because he's afraid his boss won't like him. He's the friend who always pays for dinner because he's afraid his friends will abandon him. He's the son who lives his parents' dreams because he's afraid of disappointing them. The worship mentality is really about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. Machiavelli understood that leadership, whether of a country or your own life, requires the courage to risk disapproval. The prince who tries to please everyone ends up respected by no one. This isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about understanding that you can't give what you don't have. You can't offer genuine love if you don't love yourself. You can't provide emotional security if you're emotionally desperate. The most giving people are those who give from abundance, not scarcity. The most loving people are those who choose love, not those who need it to survive. When you stop worshiping others' approval and start respecting your own worth, something magical happens. You become someone worth knowing, not because you're perfect, but because you're authentic. And authenticity, as Machiavelli understood, is a foundation of all genuine influence and attraction. So here's my challenge to you, based on 500 years of Machiavellian wisdom. Stop worshiping. Start respecting. Yourself first, others second. Build your own kingdom. Develop interests, goals, and relationships that don't depend on any one person's approval. Practice strategic generosity. Give because you choose to, not because you're afraid not to. Embrace productive conflict. Have opinions, set boundaries. Be willing to disagree respectfully. Master the art of presence through strategic absence. Be fully present when you're there, but have a life that sometimes takes you elsewhere. Become outcome independent. Be willing to lose anyone rather than lose yourself. Remember, Machiavelli wasn't teaching manipulation. He was teaching strength, real strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself constantly because it simply exists. The kind of strength that attracts respect, admiration, and yes, genuine desire. Start today. Stop the constant texting. Cancel plans that compromise your self-respect. Pursue a goal that has nothing to do with impressing anyone else. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're becoming someone worth getting. 500 years ago, Machiavelli warned us about the dangers of worship over respect. Today, we're living proof that his insights were ahead of their time. The question isn't whether these principles work. The question is whether you have the courage to apply them. If you're tired of being taken for granted, tired of watching less deserving men get the respect you crave, tired of being the safe option while she fantasizes about someone else, then you can't afford to miss what we're uncovering on this channel. Because the brutal truth is, while you've been taught to be the perfect gentleman, other men have been learning the real rules of attraction that no one talks about in polite society. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because if you don't want to spend another year being overlooked, undervalued, and friend-zoned, you need to stay plugged into these insights. Until next time, remember, stop worshiping, start respecting. Your future self will thank you.